Welcome to the Real Bible Rob podcast. And today is a special day because I have my friend here, Maria Hearing, and she's our special guest for today. Maria is a dear friend. She's a classmate. She's a teacher. She was my TA for my Hebrew class, and now she's my Hebrew reading partner. And we talk a lot. And we see each other almost weekly. So I'm just so happy that she's here. Maria has done deep research on the Book of Esther and has written scholarly papers about it and about the narrative and genres of the story. And the story is so important in biblical history because it's really the foundation myth of the Jewish nation. And it tells us so much about patriarchy and the strength of ancient women in unexpected ways. So we ask the question, is Esther the most romantic book of the Bible? And welcome, Maria.
Well,
How are
thank you. I will answer your question first. The answer is
Okay.
no. It is not the most romantic book of the Bible.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me on. I am a professional podcast listener, including yours. This is my first opportunity to be a guest on one, so I really appreciate the
Oh,
opportunity.
well, I'm so
And
glad you're here.
I will say to your listeners that he's legit put his time in on his Hebrew when you hear him talking about languages. He has been faithfully working on that daily and weekly for years after graduation. So he's
Like
not
four
making it
years.
up, folks.
Yeah. I'm just always surprised whenever we talk Hebrew together is how hard it is and how long it takes. And oh
Yes,
my goodness, you could
and
spend
how
a
much fun it
lifetime.
is.
And it is tremendously fun.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
I
really
find it
fun to
very
do it with you.
enriching.
Yes, yes. It's been a lot of fun. We're wrapping up the book of Jonah shortly
Yeah.
and heading into Ecclesiastes soon. So,
Yeah, I can't wait. Actually,
yeah.
that should be a lot of fun. I well in I can you summarize the book of Esther in 30 seconds and then we'll go right into the questions after that.
I will try. I specifically did not re-prep for this. So this is based on memory. I figured it would be more entertaining that way. So the Book of Esther starts with a giant 6 month long banquet with drinking and all of the things that go along with a 6 months long of drinking. The king of Persia asks for his wife, the queen, to be sent in to parade around all of his sycophants. She refuses, is banished. The court freaks out essentially and says, but all of the women in the entire empire will rebel against their husbands if the queen can rebel against you. And so they start a sex trafficking ring, essentially, bring all
Hmm.
the young, beautiful virgins into the capital where they have not a beauty pageant with the king.
Yes.
Eventually, a young woman, Hadassah, also known as Esther, becomes the queen as a result of that. We are now in
Mm.
chapter 2. I'm not going to hit this in 30 seconds. It was ambitious. Um, in the meantime, her uncle refuses to bow down to the one of the main villains of the story, Haman, and Haman gets a little bitter about this and negotiates an entire genocide through the king of Persia. Um, Mordecai has to go to Hadassah in the palace and ask for her help through a series of tricks and banquets. And oh, I could spend 10 minutes summarizing the book of Esther now that I'm really thinking about it. We get to a point where Haman reaches his downfall through just a sequence. It's almost a screwball comedy where it looks the king interprets him as assaulting the queen, but he's pleading for his life and has him executed on the gallows that Mordecai was supposed to be killed on. But wait, there's more because the genocide isn't canceled. In fact, the best that he can do when they go to him again is say you can defend yourselves. So there is a 2 day battle that is extended by Hadassah. At the end, the Jewish people emerge victorious, become power leaders within the empire at the time, and institute a new holiday, the first non-Mosaic holiday,
Oh, uh-huh.
that is instituted by Queen Esther, by Hadassah, which
Uh-huh.
is the festival of Purim.
Oh, well, and there you go.
There you
And she
go.
saves the nation, or she saves the
Yes.
Jewish people.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm shocked that you said it wasn't a beauty pageant. I
Yes.
mean, oh
Yes.
my, haven't we been told that our whole lives, you know?
We have, and it is
Yeah.
still in academic commentaries. I was really
Oh,
shocked doing
really?
my research, is that it is still labeled as a beauty pageant.
Oh, gee.
And that is simply not in the text.
No.
That is a later interpretation.
Yes.
Um, it You could choose to read it that way, and I wouldn't
Uh-huh.
even fault you for reading it that way, but
Yes.
it never says within the text itself that the women are judged on their beauty.
Mm. Yeah, well, that can mean a lot of different things.
Yes, yes.
So, what has made it so that Esther has been a focus of so much interest for you, and what has caused you to want to study it as deeply as you have?
We did I believe it was a week on the book of Esther in our Old Testament Hebrew Bible class all those
Hmm.
years ago with Stephen Delamarter.
Yep.
And I remember making some sort of a comment. I don't remember what the comment was, but
Hmm.
after I made it, I had that one of those little comments in your head where I thought to myself, was that anti-Semitic what I just said? And it
Yeah.
made me start to reevaluate the assumptions that I've always brought into reading the text.
Mm.
And because we can critique patriarchy, which overlaps with misogyny, but they're not equal terms, right?
Right.
One is a system
Yeah.
and one is more of an attitude.
Yeah.
And so that just got me started thinking about the book in general. And I decided I wanted to write my master's thesis on it. And I've written,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, some seminar papers. I actually have the opportunity, the ongoing opportunity to work with an Esther scholar whose work
Mm-hmm.
deeply influenced my research. So if you send thank you emails to people, sometimes they give you lovely
Yes.
opportunities.
Well, and some of your writing has gotten into descriptions of Esther, hasn't it? Or, you know,
I have, oh, see, now I'm trying to think. I have not had anything formally published on the Book of Esther
okay,
yet, but there are some things that are kind of being worked on.
I
Yes.
see. Cool. And so let's get to that sort of the meaty question here is
Right.
what genre is the Book of Esther and why does that matter so much? And I realize that this is can go a lot of different directions, but
Yes.
tell us about that.
Let's talk about it. First, I was going to mention up front, I wanted to offer some content warnings here because this is not a light and fluffy book. So, anybody
No,
who I'm not going to be giving graphic descriptions of sexual violence
no,
and rape and trafficking. But those are things that do occur in this book. And so, if that is
yes.
something that is sensitive for you, it will not hurt my feelings if you skip this podcast
Yeah.
episode. Maybe you will have me on a nicer one.
Yeah, I don't mince words too much in the podcast, so
Yes, yes, but I want to give a warning on it, especially
sure.
because this book can be very tender for people. Like it can be very
Yeah.
prized, and when you find out that something that you have historically read as a beautiful romance has a lot of violence in it, it
Yeah.
can be really difficult.
Yeah.
So, genre that's a term that is a more contemporary term that we use that describes the type of story that we are reading or hearing or watching.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, um, oh, see, now I can't remember her name. Marie Shelley.
Oh, uh-huh.
She did not think I'm going to create the genre of science fiction when she wrote Frankenstein at
Yeah.
19 years old. Maybe she was 22.
Yeah.
She wrote something which later became a genre. There are things that indicate something is sci-fi versus a western
Hmm.
versus et cetera, et cetera. That's true in ancient literature, in the Bible, and in ancient literature.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so we identify patterns in things, and we use genre to describe a broad pattern.
Yeah.
And then once a genre or pattern exists, those can be imitated specifically or deviated from specifically.
Hmm.
And readers, you gravitate towards genres that you like or genres that you don't like.
Hmm.
So that's why it's important. It helps us to understand what the author, the editor, the narrator is doing with the story.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of conversation around the genre for the Book of Esther. A very common one is that it is a form of historical fiction,
Hmm.
most likely. In fact, I would say, unless you are within a certain tradition,
Yeah.
you would not view the Book of Esther as historical.
Yeah.
That's not its purpose.
I think that's
Um,
most scholars agree with that. Yeah.
Most scholars, yes, and but there are people who would attribute this as a historical book. So that is a
Yeah.
genre. Historical fiction is one that is a very strong like Greco-Roman genre that
Hmm.
the Book of Esther has been placed into. Comedy is another very common one, and then more recently the genre of horror. So those are going to be the two that I
Hmm.
focus on.
Okay.
Comedy is the most common. There is satire, there is farce, there's screwball comedy. Like I said, you can picture Jimmy Stewart in some of these scenes,
Yeah.
and Cary Grant. Like you can
Right.
imagine it. There's a lot of hyperbole.
Yeah.
All of the women will disrespect their husbands, like things that are
Yes.
very exaggerated. A 6-month feast is very exaggerated. There's so many descriptors in the book that are just super exaggerated as a wink and a nudge to show we're poking fun
Yeah.
at this at the excesses of empire, right? um but and here's the thing, here's why I think that comedy should be we should be a little hesitant with that, is just because something was originally meant to be funny or interpreted as funny does not mean that it is funny,
Yeah.
or that it should be considered funny, right? And so some parts of the book, absolutely. There's some very like Haman being,
Yes. Getting
like
caught.
getting
Yeah.
caught, like that scene can be very funny, but
Yeah.
horror has comedic elements as well. But
Sure.
what I think about as I think a very realistic, well, I'm talking about a cartoon, it's not realistic, but a more accessible. There is an old Mickey Mouse cartoon. I hope Disney's not listening to us here. Where Mickey and Minnie are in an airplane and he wants to kiss her and she doesn't want to kiss him, so he literally tries to crash the airplane to scare her so much that she will kiss him. That's really horrible, right?
Yes.
That's the little boy is pinching you because he
Yeah.
likes you
Yes.
to a very extreme
Right.
degree. This is not funny, right?
Right.
So it's I think that's a good way of seeing how some of the elements in the Book of Esther may have intended to be funny, but
Yeah.
mass sexual trafficking rings are not funny, right?
Well, do you think our perception of the genre has changed over the centuries or the years? Are we more open to different kinds of interpretations today than we used to be, or what? What do you think?
I think so, but generally speaking, a lot of the literature, I hope you can't hear my bird too loudly. She's
Nope, nope.
okay, okay, good. There has been some pushback around the proposal of horror being the genre
Hmm.
for the Book of Esther, which I'll chat about here in a minute. So
Okay.
we're moving in that direction, but there is still some pushback, partially because there's still work to be done in horror studies in the Bible and in general.
Hmm.
Like some of that pushback is healthy. That's how we have academic conversations. And some of it, I think, is just old guard, not wanting to hear something different.
Hmm.
It's funny. It was meant to be funny. Therefore, it is funny. Or therefore, we can't apply any other lenses or patterns to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was thinking along these lines is that, the book of the Gospel of John, most
Hmm.
people realize that that's actually it's a very funny book. There's a lot of
Yes.
funny things in it. And but historically people have taken it so seriously,
Yes.
and is that they've missed the humor. And I wonder if
Yes.
that's part of this as well, is that when people look at it
Hmm.
more without the theological lens on it, maybe they
Yes.
can see it
And
differently.
plus, all we have is black and white or red and black and white words, right, on the text,
Yeah.
whereas these were all oral. and in
Right.
oral, and not even just oral, it would be visual, so you can show the wink and a nod,
Yeah,
that
right.
is not present in to our eyes, to our
Correct. Yeah.
21st century Western civilization
Yeah.
eyes, to see that something is funny.
With
Um,
sanitized translation, you know. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't remember what there's like the oldest written joke on record. I think it is Roman, and it's something about a dog, and it's nonsensical, right? But we know from the context that it's a joke.
Yeah,
But
right.
comedy is very, very contextual.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah. Do you have some tips on how we deal with in reading the book to become acquainted with its complexities, various characters, how we should look at them?
Yes, I do want to jump back though, because I didn't
Oh,
quite outline the information about why it should be horror. So if I can,
oh, yeah, yeah.
if
Go
I
ahead
can
and do that
rewind us
first.
here.
Sure. Sorry about that.
So I do want to cite my source here. Dr. Erica Dunbar is the
Mm-hmm.
scholar who has proposed horror to be the genre for this. She is the scholar that I have the opportunity to work with.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
And for any of your listeners who are interested, she has an open source article that we could provide
Okay.
the information to, where she initially proposes this.
Okay. I'll put
Um,
that in the notes when I
okay,
post it. Yeah.
great. But essentially, her argument is it's exploring, I won't get too into the technical weeds on it, but it
Okay.
is based on like the main elements of this is not a beauty pageant that is happening. This is
Yes.
not all of the women voluntarily choosing to leave their families for one chance to walk across the stage, hope that they're pretty enough to be happily married
Right.
after to a queen who just banishes you, if you
Yeah.
won't do exactly what he says.
Exactly.
This is a mass organized human trafficking ring. What
Uh-huh.
happens in the story follows I do not remember the governing authority that has like legally defined human trafficking, but it hits every single it hits
Right.
every single
Yeah.
marker for that. And then there is sequential every night one of them is raped by the king.
Yep.
Even if they have agency in this, in what they do, whether they are trying to win this contest or not, it
hmm
is still assault, whether you are trying to win or not. They do not have a choice, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those would be, I would say, for me to spend 2 minutes on that component. Those
Yeah.
are the things that show like this is a horror. Their parents were horrified. These girls were horrified. They were removed. And this isn't just Persian people, and it's not just Jewish girls either.
Yeah.
This is
Right.
from every province of the entire empire. So these are rich
Yes.
people,
Right.
rich girls, poor girls, um, privileged girls, disabled girls. This, if we take the all in this is
Yeah.
every
Yep.
young,
Yep.
beautiful virgin in the entire empire. This is hundreds of girls
hmm
forcibly removed. Their identities are erased as they are go through a 6 or 12 month beautification ritual,
Right.
which
Yes.
is
Because
often
that's
interpreted
described. Yes.
right as pampering, but is more. I mean, I can't imagine suddenly being forcibly removed across the country and needing
hmm
to um, suddenly walk, talk, smell like, look like exactly
Right.
what a predator wants me to look like that. I mean, even if I get to use bath salts in that experience, that's not a
Exactly.
pleasant that's not pleasant, right?
Well, I
So
think
that
also what backs up your idea about them coming from all over the empire is that that's what the party is about, right? It's about all the vassal things.
yes,
So the Persian Empire is this big, giant, complex
yes,
empire. Yeah.
yes, it is, yes. So
Yeah. And I was thinking also about Vashti when you get to her. I mean,
mhm.
what happened to her, or if you oppose the king, what happens to you, things like that. So
Yes,
it,
yes,
it is horror.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And when we watch horror, when we read horror, there can be funny things in horror, right? That's often how,
Yeah.
um, in fact, often the best horrors have things that make you laugh. It
Yeah.
eases the tension, it makes you able to engage in it more.
Right.
Um, and so I think that the genres are not mutually, components of the genres are not mutually
Uh-huh.
exclusive. Yeah. So to answer your other question about
Yeah,
like how
about
do
the
I
tips.
recommend?
Yeah, right.
So in fact, I even mentioned this in our Old Testament class. If I can bring Buffy the Vampire Slayer into any conversation about the Bible, I am going to do so. And so I am going to recommend that everybody read the book of Esther the way I watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Whenever I rewatch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I focus on a different character and I pay more attention to their character development, how things are impacting them, how they respond to things. I pay attention to knowing where they're going to end up, however many seasons they get to live, the end result of their character and see how things. I mean, some of it's foreshadowing, sometimes it's not. Anyway, now I'm going to get on a whole Buffy tangent. I don't want to do that. But every time I do it, I enjoy it more. I see more. I understand the characters more, and it really complexifies my watching of it.
Yeah.
And I advise that we do that through the Book of Esther.
Okay.
Read it once. Read it from the perspective of all of the named characters. Read it through,
Hmm.
and who doesn't have a name?
Okay. Yeah.
Who are the anonymous people who are present, who are physically present,
Hmm.
and then read it through who would be in this room or in this situation that isn't present. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't have the servants who are changing the
Hmm.
chamber pots, right? But they're there. They would be there in this story.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought that as a useful example of that, I would kind of go through if we were to read through some of the main characters, like what are the types of things that we could glean?
Hmm.
Uh, there's a lot of conversations. Is Vashti a troublemaker in a good way or a troublemaker in a bad way? Is
Yeah.
Mordecai a good guy or a not great guy? What about
Right.
Haggai,
Oh, the
which
eunuch.
the
Okay. Yeah.
eunuch? Yes. And so there's when you are reading them through the with your eyes on that character, you can see a lot more subtleties and you can make it so
Hmm.
that they're not binary good or evil.
Hmm.
But I'm going to actually start with the one exception of that. So the king, um, who you probably will have noticed I have not named. And partially that is because he's the most powerful person in this. And I want to remove some of his
Uh-huh.
implicit power by not referring to him. It's he
Okay.
shall not be named. Also, I can't say the word very well. So
Yeah, me
it's
neither.
it's a little bit of both. I'm going to be perfectly
Yeah,
honest.
I always stumble on it.
Yes.
Unless you say the Persian, the Xerxes, whatever, Xerxes or whatever his name
Yes,
is.
yes,
Yeah.
Artaxerxes, which is easier to
Yeah.
say, but I just call him the king.
Okay. And that's fine. Well, and he's such a strange
Tool?
character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the more that would be the more pastoral way, but I'm not a pastor, so I can call him a tool.
Yes. Yeah, he's an idiot. Yeah. He's kind of an idiot too.
Yes, yes. So he is the person I think that is the most difficult to read any sort of sympathetic lens.
Sure.
He's a buffoon. He is selfish. He's incompetent. Most of the comedy is just in his complete inability to do anything except serially rape hundreds of women, of
Yeah.
girls and women. And so, but if you do read it, I would recommend, and again, this is our aberration, pay attention to the king in the story and consider some contemporary US political leaders, and you may gain some insight into
Yeah.
the king and into some of our political situation.
Right.
I'll leave that one
Unchecked
there.
power. Yeah.
Yes, unchecked power where everyone around you is has to tell you how great you are or you get punished.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yeah.
So
We have few examples of that, so you
we
can
do.
choose your favorite one. Yes.
We do. Yes. So Queen Vashti, if we read this through her lens,
Hmm.
she is complicit in the Persian Empire. She's the queen of Persia,
Yeah.
but she's also trapped in this system. She can't do whatever it is that she wants. And sure enough, as soon as she says no to the king, she
Hmm.
is punished, question mark, with banishment. Was that a punishment or was that a relief? Who could say? But
Yes.
you can read it either way. If you're paying
Hmm.
attention to Vashti, you could see this as her escaping. You could see it as a punishment. Did she want to stay? Did she regret
Hmm.
her choices because she had to leave? So those are the types of things. If you're focusing, she's really just present as a character in the first chapter, but you can kind of see
Yeah.
her shadow through the rest of it. Also, like her actions directly lead to human trafficking. She
Yeah.
is not to blame for that,
No.
but her actions of rebellion did have consequences for other people
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
The named character of this book, Esther, I will refer to her as Hadassah because that
Hmm.
is her Jewish name.
Okay.
Esther is her Persian name. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
generally speaking, I refer to the book as Esther and the character as Hadassah
Hmm.
to give her some of those Jewish roots and to make those more present.
In the book is the Hebrew, does it refer to Esther or Hadassah in the book or in the
It's
Hebrew?
She is called Esther throughout, but it tells us that her name is Hadassah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and that's her Hebrew name.
I
Yes.
see.
Um, so she is the primary sympathetic character, of course.
Of course, yeah.
She's orphaned as a girl, and her relative Mordecai, who's often referred to as an uncle.
Hmm.
He becomes her ward.
Okay.
And this can be interpreted, is she being taken care of? Is this a
Hmm.
positive relationship or is this something different? There are some non um, like Masoretic texts. I don't remember if it's in the Greek or if it's in alternative fragments. I can't remember
Okay.
the source that indicates that this may have been for grooming for her to marry him eventually, that type of
Oh,
deal.
I see. Okay.
So again, it's the
So
so
he's
she's
offering her as his,
it,
or yeah.
there are some traditions which show
Okay.
that. Yes, yes. And so she's this young girl and is suddenly swept up in this. This is not that a guard was walking down, a soldier's walking down the street, and it's like, "You girl, you're gorgeous. The
Uh,
king wants you."
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not that. It's she is swept up with every other
yeah.
vulnerable girl
Right.
in the entire empire. So
Hmm.
she is an individual impacted by mass evil. I mean, I would say
Yeah, yeah.
we can
So
call her
each
that
region may
evil.
have had their most beautiful woman that they sent to the king to, or where it was recruited for that or
Uh,
something.
the
Yeah.
text says all beautiful young virgins were
Hmm.
taken, is what
Okay.
it says.
Hmm.
So there's no volunteering in the text.
No, no.
No
But
volunteering in
it
the
could
text.
be that
Mhm.
the local ward or the local,
Sure, sure. Yep, it could have been a
selected them.
neighborhood soldier. It
Yeah.
could have been, yeah, there's not a lot of details. And again, as something that is not based in historical fact,
Right.
like
Yeah.
a lot of this is like we're looking at what the words are and we're applying these questions to it,
But
right?
it's very much in line with tradition. I mean, this did happen. I mean,
Oh,
definitely.
yes.
Yeah.
This type of thing would have happened
Sure.
in real life in empire where girls are just plucked up in
Hmm.
order to satiate men and boys,
Yeah.
and it still happens. This is still
Sure.
very present
Yeah.
in our world today. Yes. So she goes through this process again, along with all of these other girls. I always want to include them in the story,
Hmm.
even though technically I'm focusing on Hadassah right now. And it looks like she uses a lot of agency in the harem. The first time that we see, oh, so now we're getting like
Hmm.
really into my thesis. I'm going to focus, Maria. Um, she uses her agency in the harem and gains access, gains favor, gains access to resources, gains access to advice on what to do in
Okay.
order to win this, for lack of a better term, this competition,
Hmm.
in order to become the queen and escape a perpetual life in the harem.
So can
So
we attribute that to her charisma or leadership abilities, or is it more about her beauty, or what is it that
it's
causes?
probably a lot of different things.
Okay.
She also is a local. She lives in Susa, and
Oh,
so
okay.
she's not taken by I don't know if it would be camel or donkey or foot or whatever, but like so she is local. Her and also Mordecai is already powerful within the courts,
Hmm.
and so she's privileged in that
Oh,
regard.
right. Okay.
And so she may have had some training. Um, I think that you can read the text to show that she did things specifically that made it so that the head of the harem liked her. Also, it says that she pleased everybody.
Yeah.
So it was probably a combination of
Okay.
her attitude, her beauty, her skill set, her leadership.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you could read it in any of those directions. Um, However, she becomes the queen, so she wins.
Hmm.
Um, as much as you can win a sex trafficking contest, right?
Yes.
And she becomes the queen, and then there's this impending, like scheduled, like bulletins are released about we're gonna kill all of the Jews, and she's
Yes.
not aware. Like, is it because it's being kept secret? You could read it as she's unaware. You could read it as she's ignoring it. You could read it as she's disengaged because she's ambivalent. You could read it as she's disengaged because she's depressed. All of those you could read into the text
Uh-huh.
faithfully with the information that we have.
So she engaged in this contest, for lack of a better term, before she knew that the Jewish people were under threat? Or
Yes,
oh, okay.
yes, that occurs. I think it's 5 years later.
Oh,
This
okay.
so 5 years go by. You'd see the little placard on Buffy the Vampire Slayer about how many years went by,
Right.
right? um, so she gets some, and again, reading it from Hadassah's eyes, she is encouraged by Mordecai or coerced by Mordecai to
Hmm.
risk her life. If she
Yeah.
goes to her own husband, she can be killed unless he extends pity to her, right?
Yeah.
And so you can read it as encouragement or coercion. And she determines that she will risk her life in order to convince the king that she can't have the order canceled, but she can convince him that they can be
Okay.
armed and fight back.
Right.
So that is ultimately what it is that she is fighting for. And this is the bit where in this coercion slash encouragement, the very famous "If I perish, I perish." Um, and if you are reading this as a horror, like that's when your heroine is going, where it's like, I guess I die. Like if
Yeah,
I
right,
die, I
right, right.
die.
Yeah, I
I
have
don't I
nothing to
don't
lose.
have any options.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so we get five more chapters of plot line, right? I can't get, if we're going to cover some of these other I'll have your podcasters on here for
No, I
two
think that's a
hours,
good
right?
that's a good summary for
Okay.
Hadassah. I was just yeah, I wonder if you could touch on the other couple of
Yes,
characters that you're.
yes. So Mordecai, I mean, kind of I've already covered him, so he has
Hmm.
some power within the courts.
Yeah.
We can read him as um, somebody who is both, he's oppressed, he's an oppressed Jewish person under this
Yeah.
empire, but he has influence in it. He's in the city gates, which is that you go there
Right.
if you have some power and authority. Like
Yeah.
Haman, who we'll get to, like knows who he is. So like his name is known. He has indirect access to the
Hmm.
king. Um, and he took in Hadassah. This is a good thing. He heard a plot against the king,
Hmm.
about an assassination plot, and didn't just let it happen. He reported it.
Hmm.
Is that complicity in empire, or is
Right.
that trying to keep things from getting worse because maybe the next
Yeah.
guy's not great? Again, depending on, okay, am I going to read him as sympathetic or not? Like, what
Right,
would his
right. Are
motivations
his
be?
motivations always bad or not?
Right, exactly. It could be good in one place and
Right.
less good in another. And all
Hmm.
of it is within that context of oppression. But oppression is not a flat place. We have areas where we have influence and privilege,
Yeah.
even when we are oppressed. Um, let's see. And he had strength in refusing to bow down to Haman.
Hmm.
So is that out of religious conviction? Is that out of honoriness?
Hmm.
Like you can read it a lot of different ways.
Sure.
If we focus on the character of Haman, so Haman is another oppressed minority under the Persian Empire.
Oh.
He is not Persian. He is I should have written it down. I believe it's an Agagite.
Oh, okay.
There is ancient conflict between the Jewish people and the Agagites
Hmm.
from Torah, where I don't remember the specifics because I didn't refresh myself on it. And so they're mortal enemies. They're
Oh, okay. So this could be part of the
historically speaking,
animosity he
this
has
is,
toward Jews.
and
Yeah.
it also could be why it's an Agagite who is the bad guy in the story,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Is
Yeah.
is showing that. yes, we have this new empire. We're living under this new empire. We're thriving as much as we can, but here's our old ancient enemy who's
Yeah.
come and threatened us. It's very, very complex.
Hmm.
Um, but Haman is like he is oppressed under this. Does not make him a good guy, right? Oppressed
No.
people can be terrible, right? And in fact, he gets personally insulted by the behavior of Mordecai and like escalates all the way to genocide.
Yes.
Why not?
Like
Right?
immediately. Yes.
Immediately escalates all the way
Yeah.
to genocide. Um, and as a result of this, 10 of his children are killed. All 10 of
Oh,
his sons die. Um, and they're strung up in the same way that he is. And his wife now doesn't have a husband or 10 children. His wife, his
yeah.
wife now does not have children, does not have a husband. She's
Uh-huh.
named in the text as well. Zerah is her name. Um,
Ah.
but he also is aware of the king's flash temper, right? And so, like, he took, was this a calculated risk or was he too angry to even think about it?
Hmm.
Okay, last character that I specifically wanted to note is, as mentioned before, Haggai. He was
Hmm.
a eunuch, was the head of the harem that all of these girls were put
Oh,
through
okay. Uh-huh.
before they were raped by the king. Um, and I could get into all of the roles and the things that may have occurred in there, but I wanted to emphasize the fact I have found a very contemporary misconception about what a eunuch is simply a man who has lost his genitalia, and
Hmm.
it's more like it's a third gender. It's like a complete other gender,
Hmm.
because gender is about roles and not about sex,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so he is also under empire. He has literally been emasculated, right? And
Hmm.
has this gender, he does not fit into the primary genders at the time and fills this in between role,
Hmm.
where again his work is supporting empire. If he does not, he will die.
Yeah.
And so in this tenuous situation, does he help Hadassah or is he taking advantage of
Hmm.
Hadassah? Is he giving her access to things because he thinks she could go all the way? Or is it because he's trying to keep somebody else safe? Is it because he doesn't like her? You
Hmm.
know, there's all of these things you can read, um, just just by focusing on like what are his. If I'm reading it with Haggai as the good
Yeah.
guy, what does this look like?
Well, I think that's really interesting because, yeah, eunuchs are a very interesting part of the ancient world and in scripture is
Mhm.
because they simultaneously are oppressed and, without
Yes.
agency, but they're also very powerful among
Yes.
because they have the presence of
Mhm.
royalty, right? So
Yes.
at the same time, and
Yes.
it's so do you want to be a eunuch? Well, maybe or maybe not. It's
Right.
yeah,
Right. And certain forms in certain cultures and times, being a concubine was similar.
yeah,
Um,
right, yep,
not the
uh,
same
not
apples
the
and
same.
oranges, not apples and apples,
Yep,
but yes, it was different than the way that that functions now.
yep, yep. Well, that's fascinating. I think that yeah, these characters are so complex, and we can and I think obviously in different eras they were seen
Yes.
differently. Certainly in
Oh,
the
yes.
era, the purpose of the book was
Hmm.
probably to consolidate the Jewish nation. And
Hmm.
so it reads differently to it certainly read differently to them than it does to
Yes.
us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it should,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
am not, in fact, an exiled Jewish person from 2,500 years ago.
Yeah,
Like it should
exactly.
read differently. Yes.
Yeah, precisely.
Yes.
Yeah, but it that very much feeds into that intertestamental period too.
Hmm. Yes.
And what was going on then.
Hmm.
Let's see. So also when so along that line, what can we get from it? What does it say to us, and how should we use it? I'm also going to ask you to like touch a little bit on you as as a woman, how are
Hmm.
you taught to engage with the book,
Sure.
and
Sure.
then how we how should we look at that differently?
Great. So my most of my background, and I think we kind of covered this at the beginning too, and worth talking through again, is a lot of the conventional Sunday school versions of this story are that
Hmm.
this is Cinderella. This is
Hmm.
Snow White.
Right.
That is what this story is. This is a romance where a
Hmm.
beautiful young girl catches the eye of a rich, famous, and powerful man
Yeah.
who may have some flights of temper, right?
Yeah.
But really, he's constrained by the fact that he can't end his own laws, and so therefore everyone has to die anyway, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
um, and so it is very, very common. I still to teach this as how do you be a woman? You
Yeah.
be a
To young
woman by
girls. I mean,
to
yeah.
young girls.
Yeah.
Yes,
In Sunday school. Yeah.
yes. That it is important to be beautiful. It is important to be desirable,
Hmm.
which is really what we want to teach girls, right? I'm sure it has no bearing at all on other mass issues. And that in order to succeed, the goal is to be married.
Yeah.
Um, and even though, generally speaking, now we don't say marry for money, it's not considered a business transaction as it was 100 years ago and almost every other century before that, like
It was. Yeah.
because we have shifted that recently.
Yeah.
But it still is kind of present in our stories about
Hmm.
this presumably handsome, rich, powerful man,
Yes.
and you two can be swept up into this grand love story.
It's
So
kind
that
of like
is
The Little Mermaid even has that
yes,
storyline. You know that
yes,
it's yeah, like you said, Disney is just
mhm,
really plays on that, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Um, so that I think is a lot of the historic. And in that vein, there is a very strong culture right now within white Christian nationalists who are
Hmm.
using the Book of Esther to explicitly, like there's something I haven't researched specifically, but there's something I'm hearing very alarming about Project Esther,
Mm,
which seems very nefarious.
yeah.
Um, but it is being used by some of these pastors whose theology I think would I have more in common with a banana, the 98% DNA or whatever,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
about where it's Esther needing where Esther is interpreted as someone standing up to political powers,
Hmm.
which is true within the book of Esther. So it's a very common thing where they take a biblical story and they shift it a little bit in order
Right.
to promote their white supremacist, white Christian
Yes.
nationalism.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
They certainly don't
and
like Queen Vashti, you know.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Unless they do, in which case it's like, Vashti, like rejected the evils of,
Yes,
so
right.
it's very, very
But they don't
easy.
see her in a feminist light, that's for sure.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. That would be a gender role thing where the king
Yeah.
is pushing her too much. She stopped, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So that is a very common thing. So I'd say if you're going to be doing some
Hmm.
research, your listeners, your watchers, um, I would exercise caution on what are
Yeah.
your resources. Is this coming from that Christian nationalism lens?
Yes.
In which
Yes.
case, please be cautious.
Yeah, in fact,
Um,
I say this pretty often. I've said it on a few podcasts and also in a lot of my short form videos. Is the idea that when you do a Google search on biblical characters, be really
mhm,
careful because what
mhm.
gets fed to you first is usually Ligner,
Yes.
Got Questions, the Gospel Coalition,
Mhm,
Desiring God, and all
mhm.
of these are very misogynistic. So.
Yes.
I haven't done it with Esther, but I'm sure if you were to look up
Mm.
characters from the Book of Esther on Google,
Yes.
you will get fed
Mhm.
uh, a white misogynistic,
Yes.
Christian nationalist way of looking at it. So
And,
just be
and it can
careful.
be and it can be difficult to tell because it's very easy to look like it is in fact. Look at how we know we love Esther. Be like
Yes,
Esther,
yeah, right.
and so it
They
doesn't
cloak
look.
it.
It
Yeah,
doesn't. Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Some of that. is nefarious, like intentionally nefarious and deceptive.
Uh-huh.
And some of that is like, no, 6 years ago, 7, 8, however many years ago
Hmm.
that class was, like I wasn't specifically nefariously cloaking
No.
my anti-Semitism that
Right.
I'm still rooting out, right? But
Sure.
so it's not necessarily intentional. But it doesn't
Yeah.
mean it wasn't there. So that's the
Yeah.
caution.
I usually find for biblical characters that Wikipedia is surprisingly good
Yes.
because, because there's no money in it, right? Whereas the Google
Correct.
searches, there's literally hundreds
Yes.
of millions of dollars being spent on these parachurch
Yes.
organizations. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Uh, now
good.
we're that's another one of my special interests there we're touching on.
Yes.
The
But
last thing that I kind of did want to cover again in the like, so how should we read it? So I covered
yeah.
how generally it has been taught. I've offered caution as to what to be aware of that is still out there right now with some recent trends. So my personal encouragement, and this is based also on my thesis work, is like try reading Hadassah as a white woman. I don't mean that
Uh-huh.
she was a white woman. I mean that
Hmm.
in a like, okay, so what if I'm approaching this um, thinking about what would this look like now?
Hmm.
So
Right.
Hadassah is oppressed within patriarchy, check,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And the Persian Empire, check. It's not
Hmm.
Persian, it's the US Empire.
Hmm.
I'm a citizen of the US Empire, but I'm
Right.
still oppressed within it.
Yeah.
And I am oppressor within
Hmm.
it. I'm complicit in that. She struggles to save her people, but is complicit in the empire leadership at the same time.
Hmm.
And like, I'm not the model for this. I'm just using it as my experience as a white woman. Like,
Sure.
I am complicit in all of
In the
this.
structures of the society.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. See how I didn't swear there? Good job, Maria.
This is rated G. No.
Okay, yes, exactly. She uses the power that she gains of the empire in order to save her people, and in that she is responsible directly for the deaths of thousands of people
Hmm.
because she had an opportunity to call an end to the violence and asks for it to proceed to a second day. And
Oh,
there's a
uh-huh.
variety of ways we can read that. Is that
Right.
PTSD? Is that in order to
Right.
make like was there a threat that the text doesn't tell us about? Like again, we
Right.
can read it through a lot of different ways. And I have to say, white women, we're really, really great at escalating things above and beyond.
Yes.
We can have a good intention, we can have a good plan, and then we take it too far
Right.
and we end up hurting the people that we should be
Yeah. Yeah.
working alongside.
There's a lot
Uh,
to that. Yeah.
yes, yes. White women, we're also victims of patriarchy, and we simultaneously uphold various interlocking oppressive infrastructures. I had to
Hmm.
read that part because I really liked all of those words. So when I wrote the notes, it was nice and concise.
Good job.
We're all oppressed and oppressor in different facets of our lives. And
Hmm.
it's up to us to do the work, and not just white women. I'm talking to any of your listeners
Sure.
here to remove all of our isms, all of our phobias that are causing harm.
Hmm.
We aren't all equally oppressed, and some of us have more work to do than others, but the
Yeah.
work never ends. And I
Right.
think that the book of Esther, I think that's where it gives us a lot of ongoing value and importance
Hmm.
for today, for 21st century U.S. Americans in 2025 and beyond.
Yes. Amazing. I think this is it's so great. The Book of Esther also is unique in that I think it's the only book that doesn't explicitly mention God, right?
They clean
Uh,
that
t-
up in the Apocrypha, though.
yeah.
Did
Oh,
you know
okay.
that?
That's right. In
Yes.
the editions, but the
Yes.
idea being is that this is really a book about the consolidation of the
Mm-hmm.
religion and like you said,
Mm-hmm.
sort of a fictional, historical fiction
Mm-hmm.
version of that,
Mm-hmm.
and it has its place, certainly because it really helps us understand
Mm-hmm.
what they were thinking
Mm-hmm.
and that, yeah. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share or uh, um,
I can keep talking about Esther for another
yo, I
hour, so you
know, I
probably shouldn't
know.
ask me that question.
Right,
I
I
have been
know.
studying
I
Esther
love
now
you.
for
I,
5 years. So, like,
I love your enthusiasm about it and the fact that it is such it's a book that's probably a lot more familiar to young women than it is to men. Uh,
Yes.
Probably because of the way it's been used. And
Hmm.
well, and like I always say, people say lots of things about the Bible that aren't really there, and this is one of those books where you really see it. So,
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you for having me on, Rob.
well, I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge in this and giving food for thought.
And I
So,
can't believe we talked this long and you didn't talk about creeds once.
oh,
Congratulations.
oh, I have other opportunities. So, well, thank you and God bless you.
And
And
you as
thank
well.
and God bless the listeners. Goodbye.